Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Paradigm Shifts podcast with your host, Keisha Kruger. I'm an organization development practitioner and executive coach, working with leaders to create positive changes in the workplace using behavioral science. My personal mission? Share science-based tools and leadership insights from the field that you can use in the workplace and beyond. Considering we spend about 3/4 of our lifetime at work, there is incredible science and organizational psychology that could be used to rethink the way we work, lead, and ultimately live. Join me as I speak with thought leaders and business leaders in practice, unpacking light bulb moments for paradigm shifts. So excited to speak with Michael Diettrich-Chastain on this week's episode, who is an expert on peak performance in the workplace. He's an executive coach, an international speaker and facilitator, and he has worked with Global 100 companies, mid-sized companies, and small businesses to drive employee engagement, productivity, retention, and profit. With an MA in counseling and multiple certificates in workplace and leadership assessment tools, he brings 15 plus years of experience in transforming the lives of leaders and the teams that he serves. He's also the founder of ARC Integrated, a leadership development consulting firm that serves teams and leaders around the globe. And he's widely regarded as the go-to resource for helping to transform company cultures in which he works. And his writing has been featured in Time, Money, Entrepreneur, and the Washington Post. Michael's first book, Changes, which was released in 2019, became an instant bestseller in multiple categories. His mission is to help create and maintain purpose-driven organizations that elevate the consciousness of all involved. For more information about scheduling a free consultation to help improve workplace culture or leadership, feel free to view the show notes for all of the links on how to contact him. Enjoy! All right, Michael. Would you prefer Mike or Michael?
Either one's good. I've got a lot of people in my world that call me Mike or Michael, so dealer's choice.
Thanks. Well, I am so excited for you to be here today. I've been thinking about this topic, change, as it relates to personal and also in the workplace, and you're just the perfect expert to have a conversation around change with. We're going to talk a little bit about your book today, but I want to talk to you first about organizational change. And in organizations, change is often talked about, and leaders want to know how to affect change in the most efficient and effective way possible. But when a change effort fails, which is typically around 70% of the time, the missed mark is typically, you can point to a couple different obstacles, but typically it comes down to a lack of executive support or active sponsorship, or the other side of the house, which is a lack of buy-in from the individuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I learned about these obstacles, and while I'm supporting change in our organization, it became quite obvious that while we want to see success from an organizational level happen with change, we're not trying to change the organization. We're trying to change the behaviors of the individuals within that organization, which is why I enjoyed your book so much, because you really talk about change at a personal level. And you talk about these 7 dimensions of life as it relates to change. Can you tell me a little bit about those and kind of how you came up with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to highlight something you said, though, which I think is so fascinating. And this actually just came up. We were just with a client last week in Michigan, and we were doing a course on emotional intelligence and coaching skills and the relationship between the two. And of course, talking a lot about change. And one of the things that you just mentioned that we were talking about last week is the idea of, how do we predict the effectiveness of change? And what's fascinating about what you just said is that those two predictors at the organizational level are the same two predictors at the individual level, just phrased a little differently. So at the individual level in a coaching scenario, or you could rephrase that as like a scenario to create change. The two predictors of success are, one, the goodness of fit between the coach and the recipient, right? And in the organizational level, you just mentioned, right? Like the support from, the leadership level, right? Could match that with goodness of fit. And then the second predictor of effectiveness in a coaching scenario is the willingness and readiness for change from the individual, right? Just like at the organizational level. So I just wanted to make that tie, Keisha, that, what we see at a system level that predicts effectiveness of change is really the same at the individual level. And so, anyway, just I wanted to appreciate what you said there.
That's huge. And so it's just from a different perspective then, right? It's
Hmm.
from the
Hmm.
individual looking out rather than outward looking in.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. And so, yeah, to answer your question about the book, I, a number of years ago started to ask this question around like, what are the factors that I've seen be the common denominators of effective change making with the thousands of clients I've worked with over the years. And to give a little context, I've done organizational development work and executive coaching work on and off throughout my whole career. And then when I wasn't doing corporate work, I worked in the mental health world as a licensed psychotherapist, and I still hold a license, but haven't practiced in many years. But I only bring that up because I've looked through various lenses around how human beings create change, whether it's at a more business setting, like developing skills in our team, or developing communication or EQ skills, or delegation skills as a leader, right? Looking at
Mhm.
change from like a kind of a basic thing that we all experience, like transition change. And you could house that as like, you know loss of a loved one, or a breakup of a relationship, or the birth of a child, or the death of a loved one, or transition from a job into something else, right? Those are challenges and changes that a lot of us face. And then on
Yeah.
the severe end, you've got folks that battle severe and persistent mental health issues that really challenge their basic view of reality,
Yeah.
or folks that are challenged to get their basic needs met.
Mm.
And worked across this kind of spectrum of populations. And I give you that background to say that's really where these 7 dimensions of the book emerged, as asking the question across the spectrum of clients that I've worked with: what are the common things that influence not only the ability to create the change we want, but to respond to the unpredictability of change that we're all faced with always throughout life? And that's where these 7 emerged from.
It's amazing that you are able to kind of synthesize all of the different domains and areas. And when it comes to like assessing where you want to change or what's maybe not working, what does that look like using these 7 dimensions? Do you just kind of go
Mhm.
through each of the dimensions and you ask yourself some questions? You have so many tools in your book that it just made me want to sit next to a fire, get my journal out, and start writing. To be honest with you, I just
Right.
want to keep going back to it. But
Yeah.
for everyone listening, kind of what would you like, how would you say would be the best approach?
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Well, that's encouraging. I think really that is the best approach. There's not well, I'll give you 2 answers. One is I don't think there's really a shortcut to building a skill set into one of these domains, or strengthening a particular domain. So like, for instance, a few of the domains are, cognition, the way we think,
Yeah.
heart is our emotional self. Can we regulate? Are we aware of our emotions? Action is our habits and routines that we tend to do consciously or unconsciously. So whichever one of these we want to improve, to me, the secret sauce is always practice,
Mm.
which is why in the context of what you mentioned, there's so many activities within the book to help you strengthen that particular domain of your life. And so it's just like anything, like, if we go to the gym, we're not going to build a 6-pack in a day, right? It's going to
Right.
take months and months of work. If we pick up a new sport, we're going to be bad at it initially. And so
Mm.
any kind of change process is going to necessitate, discipline and practice. And so that's one thing I would mention. And then, in the book, there are certainly, activities that are connected to each of the domains.
Mhm.
And we also utilize an assessment tool that basically is a self-reporting tool that allows people to, one, kind of assess on a Likert scale how they feel, their level of aptitude within each of the domains. And then a secondary part of the assessment is really just a reflection piece around, what do I know to be true about this particular domain in my life? What's one small commitment I could make, to changing something about it? And then what's the deadline for that commitment? And so I'm a big believer in the power of just, simple practices, which doesn't probably sound very interesting or sexy, but
It
I think
works.
that's often what works. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you work with clients, you typically see people initially come to you with like, tell me what the shortcuts are. How do is the
Mhm.
quickest way to get there? Is that what you see often?
Well, a lot of the clients that we work with now, they're certainly always asking about how to create some kind of change. it's usually in the context of their own leadership development, or the effectiveness of their workplace culture, or the effectiveness and performance of their leadership teams. And so it's usually housed around, those kinds of topics. And so depending on the particular topic that they have, we may take one route or another. So like, is it that they have a problematic employee? Is it they have a really high performing employee but is challenged to get along with the rest of the team members? Is it that the leader themselves recognizes a deficit that they want to improve upon? So it kind of depends on the problem we're tackling, so to speak.
And you bring up an interesting point. Anyone can go through these 7 domains and kind of self-assess where they may need some more, work on or development on. But I know you talk a lot about feedback loops. So,
Mm-hmm.
how important is feedback loops in the work of self-assessing for areas or domains that you want to make change in?
Yeah, yeah. I have a pretty strong opinion about this. So when you look at the research around like the species that will survive the longest, right?
Hmm.
It's not the smartest, it's not the strongest. It's the one with it institutes the most feedback loops. And so one of
That's
the things
crazy.
we'll talk to our clients about, and I was just lecturing about this last week with a group, is that there's a unique factor that we have as human beings that no other species has, which is the limitless potential of adding more and more feedback loops, right?
Limitless.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and that's really, I think, maybe an underemphasized value that we have, right? Because it again, it allows us to adapt to really anything at
Mhm.
the speed that really is just dependent upon the amount of feedback loops that we institute. And so
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in it. I think culturally there's a little bit of a challenge at play, which is our relationship with failure.
Yes.
And as generally, I think
Mhm.
like we tend to, as I'm generalizing, but as a culture, have like this super negative connotation with failure. And I'm certainly in the business of trying to change that with all the folks we work with, and re-identify like what could a better relationship, healthier relationship with failure be. Because it's essentially all that could be, if we choose to conceptualize it differently, is just a feedback loop that will allow us to grow, change, and learn and improve.
An opportunity for growth. And that's what I was going to ask next, was around before you, like, let's say you set up those feedback loops, those systems in all the areas of your life, whether it's at work with your boss or your colleagues, or it's at home with your spouse or your children.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you have to be ready to receive the feedback?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I think that gets back to this kind of like relationship that we have with failure, right? Because if
Hmm.
we see critical feedback or constructive feedback as, if we interpret that message as, oh gosh, I've failed, and then that gets interpreted as with like shame or blame, or
Hmm.
resentment of some kind, then that's not as helpful. But if we can reconceptualize it into, okay, this is data that's just going to allow me to get better, then I think that serves everybody, not just us, but those in our ecosystem as well.
Yeah. How much of that paradigm is shaped by our childhood, our upbringing,
Mm.
kind of who influences us as we get older, that inner dialogue that forms, right? Being
Mhm.
that you are a psychotherapist and you play in that space, like how much do you think is really influenced by that?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's greatly influenced by our upbringing, by our traumas that we've had over the course
Yeah.
of our life. And trauma can be minor, right? Or
Hmm.
minor, generally speaking, right? It could be just some experience that gave us a message that then was turned into a belief that we
Hmm.
then use to filter all the other experiences that we have. And I think, getting back to like the 7 principles in the book, I think that those things, those seven, will continue to like work on us for better or for worse, right? So
Mm.
while a lot of our beliefs and our interpretations of the world may have been formed at an early age, um, they continue to be formed based on our choices. So like, for instance, one of the domains is environment, which is the people, places, and I define it as the people, places, and things in which we choose to be around.
Mm-hmm.
One unique feature of that is like one of the environments that's most common that I think people maybe take for granted is the places we spend our time online. Like that's
Oh.
one of our major environments. Of course, the more predictable or maybe obvious ones are, our friendships and relationships, our coworkers, our workplace cultures. These are all environments. But I bring this up, Keisha, because our environments are influencing us on a
Mm-hmm.
daily, weekly, yearly basis, and so again, I think we have to take responsibility for how, in this case, environments are continuing to drive or change our beliefs and our actions in the world.
I would have not thought about social media as an environment, and so
Mm-hmm.
I'm really grateful that you brought that up as a consideration because we do spend so much time and energy there. And
Mm-hmm.
anything that we put our time into, our energy, our effort, in my opinion, I think we need to self-assess those things and evaluate them over time, ongoing, right? What's
Mm-hmm.
working for us, what's not working for us any longer. But with anything in life, if someone doesn't want to change or put the effort into changing, then the results are just not going to come, right?
That's it. Yeah.
So, how do leaders engage individuals with changes in an organization who don't resonate with the change or maybe don't want to participate in that change, taking it
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
back into the workspace?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple answers. So I think if the organization is one that is a regularly changing culture, which
Mm,
I would argue that most organizations now, if they're not being explicit that that's the kind of organization they are, they probably should be, because I think it's pretty hard to not be a regularly changing environment based on all just the factors that are involved in the world right now in our experience as humans, right? We're just there's so much that's constantly changing. So I bring that up that they should be identifying, in my opinion, as a regularly changing environment on the front end of their interview process
that's
with
huge.
candidates, right? To be able to really vet, is this particular person someone that's comfortable with regular adaptation? Is this someone that is going to be able to kind of roll with changes? So that's one answer. Another answer I would give, it's funny, we were talking about this at this group I mentioned last week. There's a methodology inside the therapy world called motivational interviewing. Have you ever heard
Mm,
of this?
mhm,
Motivational interviewing. So this is it's a framework that was developed originally to look at change in the addiction world, and more specifically resistance to change, to your question, right? So
mhm.
but what's cool about it as a methodology is that even though it was originally applied in that space, it really works well for resistance to change in general.
Wow.
And so there's a framework inside of it called the OARS system, OARS.
Hmm.
And OARS is a way to frame questions. And so if someone is resistant, this could be a tool that could be helpful. And so OARS stands for this. O is open-ended questions,
Mm.
right? So you get in this, most listeners probably know what those are, right? Not asking questions that end with yes or no or a singular answer, but asking questions that allow us to dive deeper.
Like what, how, when,
Yep.
instead of do you, can you, why, that kind of thing.
100%. Love
Okay.
it. Yeah. Yeah. You nailed it. That's it. And then, so that's the O. So the A is affirmation.
Hmm.
So open-ended question, affirmation. Affirmation would be like affirming back their experience so that it does two purposes, right? Hopefully they feel heard, and hopefully it gives them a chance to tell back to you if you're hearing them right, which
Mm.
is, a common challenge with communication in general is that
Yeah.
our wires just get crossed. And a lot of that just has to do with getting better at active listening
Active
skills and
listening.
asking better questions, right?
Mhm.
So that's the A. The R is reflection. So reflecting back again what you heard, and then S is summary. So if we were talking for a few minutes, Keisha, I might say, okay, this is kind of the gist of what I heard in the last 5 minutes. Am I getting that right? So that's that summary. So I think that it may sound like a simple tool, but just getting better at asking questions and trying to understand the other person's experience, oftentimes paradoxically leads to a greater readiness for whatever change we want to help them through.
And that open dialogue creates a space where you can dig in a little bit more to what that resistance to change is, right?
Love that. Yeah,
Maybe it's
absolutely.
not, what was presented on the surface by the individual, but it's something else that maybe either could be supported through the organization or placed in a different place, right? Like maybe their resistance to change is a fear of, financial security or a loss of job or a loss of income if we make this change. Where that manager, that individual leader, could support that fear by stating that that is not something that's going to happen, and those kind of responses.
100%. Yeah, I love that. And yeah, as you're saying that, it makes me think like that is a feedback loop for the leaders should they wish
Mm,
to engage, right? They're instituting a feedback loop to try and learn more, to your point, not only about that person's experience, but maybe if they interview enough of these folks that maybe are resistant to change, it reveals to them new
mhm.
options, new decisions, new paths to take that they wouldn't have yet landed on if they didn't dig into the folks that resistant their experience.
That's huge, and this reminds me a lot of coaching, and I think
Oh
both of
yeah.
us have been in the executive coaching space and have, some accreditation to coaching, and I think a lot about those capabilities at the manager level, and I know it's a little bit different, but if our managers are not supporting the change efforts, then we miss out on a huge opportunity to move individuals through that change from their current state through transition to future. And so, how do we support managers in either building those capabilities, whether it's setting up feedback loops or
Mhm.
encouraging them to be better coaches? Like, what are you seeing or noticing in organizations when it comes to that?
Yeah, well, this might not be surprising. I'm guessing you've seen some of this too, but the pattern that has existed, I think, for a long time in, promoting people because of, seniority or longevity in the business, because of politics within the business,
Mm,
because there's, no one else available, or because they have a skill set within their particular domain. None of those answers, right, have anything to do with their leadership skills. And so
mhm.
I think that's a low hanging fruit, perhaps, is as we're moving folks into managerial or leadership positions, to be ensuring that we're not just promoting based on any of those four things I just mentioned, but that
Yes.
if there are any of those four, there is also leadership savvy within that particular individual, or at least leadership potential. And
Mhm.
then if there isn't, or maybe there's some future potential, either way, arming them with skills and I'm sorry, with training, that can develop
Mhm.
those skills, which, I think some organizations do really well. They've got entire, learning journeys for, or leadership, cohort experiences that they'll take folks through upon reaching a certain position. But my guess is, generally speaking, there's probably more room for that
Mhm.
than currently goes on. So, that would be my first suggestion, is like empower folks in management as you're hiring with better leadership training.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I think, I'll give you a few answers. I think there's a lot of power in instituting internal coaching programs
Mm.
within organizations that can allow for, cross-functional creative dialogue, that can allow for, exchange hierarchically. I think there's mutual benefit in the practice of coaching skills. Like, if you're the one being coached, even though you're not the coach, like, you're learning the principles of coaching, which then you
Yeah.
can provide as a manager to those that you're leading. So I
Yeah,
think
through
there's
the
all these,
action.
yeah, there's all
Mhm.
these benefits for, and we see some clients that have like very robust internal coaching programs, and others that are like excited to do it. And so I think that could be a great answer. And then lastly, I would just say, if you're leading other managers, is just to have more, this is going to sound simple, but have more dialogue with them
Yeah.
and ask more about what is it that they need in order to, get up to speed with supporting those that they're leading. I think that there's never there can never be too much of that, I guess,
Yeah,
is the
and
constant suggestion.
all of this has to be championed from the top, right?
That's my, yeah, that's my belief. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's my belief. I think that I was just talking to somebody about this recently. I think that the smaller the system, the more influence that the particular leader or C-suite of that business has.
Hmm.
Um, Meaning that like their even their like personal journey and their like personality, aptitudes, all of that has greater influence the smaller the ecosystem. And
Yeah.
maybe that's obvious because it's, there's more exposure directly to from everyone to that direct leader.
Hey everyone, I want to take just a quick break from this week's chat to tell you about something very exciting. It's something for those of you who listen to my podcast that train Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and it's called BJJ Summer Week. So, what is it? Imagine participating in one of the biggest BJJ community camps in the world and training amongst hundreds of other BJJ practitioners. People coming from all around the world with the willingness to share their culture and their knowledge of BJJ with each other. That's what BJJ Summer Week is all about. It's 5 days of seminars, parties, excursions, incredible food, and more in the capital of the Mediterranean, Cagliari, Sardinia. And the next BJJ Summer Week is happening next year from September 20th to the 24th of 2023. If this is something you'd be interested in joining, there is an early bird special if you book now on www.bjjsummerweek.com. If you book by December 31st with the code Paradigm Shifts, you'll get a tatami gi for free. You have the right to cancel the camp before 30th of May for any reason. I'll be there. I'm so excited to go next year. I was there last year. So what are you waiting for? Get your BJJ friends together and start the planning. Book today. Join BJJ Summer Week. Now, let's get back to this week's chat. Yeah. I'm just thinking about organizations that have maybe been around for a long time and have
Mhm.
kind of a culture that's old, but they're wanting to leave it behind, but they have individuals who have been with the organization for as long as the organization has existed, right? And
Mhm.
so those are individuals I feel like would have the hardest time, most difficult time adjusting or adapting to change, especially if like the organization is 30, 40, 50 years old and they've been
Sure.
there that entire time. And, I hear resistance from, employees or managers around change all the time when it comes to like, I'm too busy or
Mhm.
I don't have enough time. It's just another thing that you're adding to my plate. How do you help people around that? Because that's a mindset thing, right? Everyone's busy.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, so there's a solution to this that hopefully this is a good answer to your question. I'm going to take it in a little bit of a different direction, but um, so there's a whole field called appreciative inquiry,
Love
right?
it.
And you're familiar with it. And in this field, there's a lot to it, but there's a word called convening, which I think was coined by the founder of Appreciative Inquiry, which is David Cooper Ryder. And this idea of convening, which we've used as a tool with clients, and I've seen it firsthand. It's a phenomenal tool to address what I think what your question is, which to reframe is like, how do you get an entire system that's maybe a little older, kind of out of its traditions and into like a more adaptable current framework, and how do you do that by leveraging maybe the wisdom and experience that folks that have been there for a long time have. This convening idea is that you would take, maybe a day or a series of days, and the purpose of that would be to bring in diverse members across the business's ecosystem. So maybe it's some of these senior leaders, it's maybe some entry level folks, maybe it's some new hires, maybe it's even some vendor partners or some customers.
Hmm.
The more diversity, the better. And then you land on hopefully a really good question that you want to answer, and then there's various exercises that will facilitate this group going through, ultimately landing on way better solutions than they would be able to land on separately within their own like divisions of the business.
Yeah.
So the maybe the obvious benefit is that they get these various solutions, but there's a lot of other benefits in the context of connecting the various members of the ecosystem. So you're building bridges, you're building better
Yeah.
relationships, more rapport. You're also giving like members of various parts of the business a voice so that
Hmm.
they can see the value, from those that just got there to those that have been there for 30 years,
Yeah.
right? They can see the value in real time of the diversity of ideas and solutions that are coming up in the room. And so there's just all these cascades of benefits in addition to being able to solve complicated problems
Mm.
that we see. It's really exciting. So that would be my recommendation, is to be able to host either a singular or a series of these convening events.
Yeah, an AI or Appreciative Inquiry Summit, it really focuses on the future state, right? And it's a positive orientation around the future state, like what's possible, what are the possibilities. But I love the benefit that you mentioned around bridging and breaking down silos that happen in
Hmm.
cultures or organizations, and maybe pockets that occur through an organization's maturity state over time. So
Yep.
great benefits.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the only addition I would give to that, when we've run these events, there's really like three phases to them. There's the, what is it from the past that we never want to let go of, or what can we leverage, right?
Mm,
And I'm super simplifying here.
yeah.
Um, what are we doing so well right now that we want to continue to do, or maybe even improve on? And then to your point, the visioning, what does excellence look like for us, in many years to come from now? So that's a
Yeah.
very simplified version, but I've seen so much value come from like putting our lenses on across those three domains: past, present, future.
And how important is it to bring diversity into representation in this group?
Yeah, yeah. So in my experience, super important, right?
Mhm.
Because you get diversity of perspective, which then only lends us to greater, creative solutions.
Yeah. I love this quote, and I think you've heard it before. People change when the pain of change is greater than the pain of staying the same.
Yeah, yeah. Love it, love
Yeah.
it,
Does
love it.
that does that
I believe.
does that still ring true for everything
I
that you've worked on? And
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I would say, yeah, I would say for certainly in my own life, like it resonates. And for all the folks that we work with, that's, I think that's absolutely true. And I think it can change,
mm,
right? So for instance, may have a goal that there's a lot of pain around, and then we start to get through some of that goal, and maybe the pain lessens, and then maybe the motivation for that goal might change, or it may change into something different. Maybe they decide, okay, I actually want to go, a different direction.
is that
um,
why change gets so difficult to sustain when you're like, let's say I'm making a change in my life that it's a big one. Maybe it's
mhm.
a move across country, or maybe it's a transition to a new career role. But you mentioned how the pain of that change goes down once you become a little more familiar, comfortable.
Mhm. Mhm.
Is that why it's so difficult? Is because then it's like, okay, I've made it, I've arrived. Now I can go revert back to my old ways, and I
I
don't
think
have to push forward.
I think that's a potential. Yeah, I think there's a lot that contributes to why change is difficult. At what you just said, I think is one reason. I think another reason, which is odd. I think we're wired against it.
Yeah.
At a animalistic level, like we're wired against change. Like what we're wired for is seeking safety, right?
Mm,
And thousands of years ago, safety might have looked like shelter, and do we have food, and are we free of predators,
yeah.
right? And maybe now safety looks like, yes, there are basic needs met, but you know am I not getting a barrage of hateful emails? Do I have some good friendships in my life?
Yeah.
Am I free of illness? Am I reaching the goals that I want to reach? So safety looks a little differently. But you could also say safety is also about predictability. So we want to be able to understand, like,
Mm,
things are predictable. And so I say that, Keisha, because change is the opposite of that, right? It's moving into the space of uncertainty. And so I think at a core level, there's some discomfort with that. And
yeah.
so, and paradoxically, I also believe that it's one of the most important skills that we can build as humans, because it's the most predictable thing. Meaning,
Mhm.
change is the most predictable thing that we'll have to face in our lives. Like
Yeah.
there's no certainty, there is no constant, right? That things will continue to evolve and iterate and change. And so, to me,
Mhm.
it's like the core skill set that serves all other core skill sets.
I know, and we're getting a little philosophical here, but you made me think that, change has been with us since the beginning of time. I mean, it's going to be a part of our existence forever.
Mhm.
It's just, to me, why it just, I get so curious about why we haven't gotten really good at it, right? Like, why is it taking so long? We do it so much.
Yeah, it's
All the
true.
time. So to your point, it is probably the strongest skill that you can develop. And in your
Mhm.
book, you have so many different tools and mechanisms, reflections, activities, exercises, and you talk a lot about meditation and breath work. And I can't say enough about those things. I think that we can all benefit from more of those tools. But the
Mhm.
other thing that you have accompanying your book are these cards. So tell me a little bit about these.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So the card deck emerged. So they're essentially a card deck of questions. Let's see if we have. I think I've got one right here. Oh no, I don't. I just grabbed them from a trip. I was just on with a client. I got them behind me. But anyway, so they're a card deck of questions, and there's 7 domains that we talked about, 7 pillars,
Hmm.
and the questions are reflective of those pillars. So, for instance, one of the pillars is cognition. So the questions are all about the nature of how we think, right?
Hmm.
Are we abundance oriented? Are we deficit oriented? Do we think about solutions and creativity? Do we think about all the problems in the world? Heart is another one. That's all about our emotional self, right? So the questions are oriented around our emotional self, and so on and so on. So there's 7 dimensions, 7 questions per 49 questions. Um, I'll tell you that card deck has been so fun
So
and
fun.
delivered so much value, I think, to so many folks. Yeah, and so just to give some examples of application, we'll use it in team building events.
Hmm.
And so, if we want to have a team connect more effectively to one another, we'll use that. And there's various activities you can use with it in the deck. There's like 6 activities that it explains how to use.
I love the
Um,
application of this, and I love how you can use it solo, and they give you
mhm,
activities and suggestions for that. I actually will is one of the things that you recommend in here is to, for if you're doing it solo, is to like place them, spread them out on a table, and just pick one that you gravitate towards, or take them as a stack and just every day pull one and read
mhm,
that and
mhm.
answer that. And those questions provide you insights, and insights, when you apply them, create change, and that's
There you go.
the whole thing. And I love that so much.
There you go. Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a ton of fun. One of the in the context of org development,
Mhm.
one of the activities that I've seen be really powerful is, and I think this is in the deck, but you take the questions and you flip them question up. So
Hmm.
there's an image on one side, there's a question on the other. So you lay them all out on a table, question side up at a team meeting, and you invite the team to say, hey, what's a question that you think we should be asking ourselves right now as a team that will serve our betterment? And so,
Ooh.
so for instance, Keisha, one of the questions is like, when's the last time you took a risk? So if I'm a team member, I might choose that one and say, hey, listen, everybody, we are not being very courageous in our decision making. So this is the reason I chose this question.
Wow.
Or another question is, what's a belief you've yet to challenge? So team member, 3 might pick that and say, hey, listen, we've got some core beliefs in our team that I don't think are really serving us. And so this is the card that I chose. So what I've seen that do
Mhm.
is just, set fire to really great conversations around, not only the dynamic with the team, but their like decision making about, where they're going with strategic initiatives, for instance. So really powerful.
It's really surfacing again, like that revealing and those feedback loops within the loops that you were
Yeah.
talking about earlier. So this is a good conduit or facilitative way to do it, and it's fun. It's really
Mhm.
fun. So, Mike, I have one last question just so we can wrap up here. And I like to
Yeah.
end all of my episodes with this question. What is the most recent paradigm shift that you've experienced, whether it's related to this work or anything else?
Ooh.
Put you on the
Okay.
spot a little bit there.
Yeah, that's good. Most recent paradigm shift. Um, well, I'll tell you one I'm kind of on the edge of right now,
Hmm.
which is this is one I'm kind of been thinking about. So during COVID, our business changed, like I think many businesses changed to like doing all virtual work,
Mm-hmm.
and which was awesome. And it's really like changed the way in which we serve clients into really like a hybrid sense. Like we could do either. And now this year, I've done more travel this year than probably most of the last like 6-7 years. It's been on the road a ton. So the paradigm shift that I'm kind of like in the midst of right now, as I kind of come up to the edge of my desire for volume of travel, I'm like not quite there, but I'm getting to the edge of it. I really like to travel, so but I'm starting to ask this question, like, what are more passive ways that I can create resources for our clients, so that I can still continue to serve them, but maybe have to utilize my time less. So it's not a shift that I've completed yet, but it's one that I'm like wrestling with in the midst of it now, and wrestling with in the midst of like how we're offering things in our business. And so yeah, so that would
I
be my
love
answer.
that. And you love to travel. And so would
Mhm.
this open up more time and space for you to be able to do other things that you enjoy in your personal life?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's it. And so, so, like the card deck, I'm excited about this. I'm excited about this idea of bringing more resources like that can be tools and simple strategies that clients can
Yeah.
leverage on their own. So yeah, stay tuned. I've got more in the works.
I'm so looking forward to hearing about what you come up with and what you discover. And I want to thank you so much for this conversation. It's been so amazing. And I think that we might have solved some problems today.
All right. Well, I hope so. It was a real pleasure. Great to see you.
Thank you. It's nice to see you as well. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to leave a review, rate, and subscribe wherever you're listening. If you know a business leader in practice or friend who you think would be interested in this episode, please consider sharing it with them. I am so grateful for your support. For more updates, you can follow us at Paradigm Shifts Podcast on Instagram. See you on the next episode.